She looks like she came straight from some remote village, and maybe she's here looking for a job. She's here for the interview too. I think she's in the wrong place. Well, best of luck, collector madam. Soft laughter echoed through the waiting hall. Are you here for the civil services interview? The female panelist asked politely. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, Emma Carter replied respectfully. Where did you complete your education? I studied in a government school in my village, sir. Later, I graduated from the district college. I never attended any coaching classes. Interesting. What did your father do? He worked as a school janitor, sir, but he passed away a few years ago. If you were appointed to administer one of the poorest districts in the country, what would be your first priority? Education and healthcare, sir. Poverty grows where opportunities are missing. If people receive proper education and medical care, they can build a better future for themselves. You come from an extremely poor family yourself. If you are selected for such a prestigious position, do you think success will change you? Emma smiled gently. No, sir. Poverty doesn't change a person's character. It only describes their circumstances. What is your greatest strength? I never give up. And your biggest weakness? My mother. The panel looked at her with curiosity. What do you mean? If my mother cries, I can't stay strong. And if you are not selected today, I'll prepare again and come back stronger, sir, because giving up has never been an option for me. The chairman nodded with a faint smile. Thank you, Emma. Emma stood up, thanked the panel, and quietly walked out of the interview room. Outside, a few candidates whispered to each other. That was quick. Looks like she didn't make it. Just imagine, what would you do if you had absolutely nothing left to lose, when every direction is filled with insults and rejection, when you don't even have enough money to buy tomorrow morning's breakfast? Could someone in that situation still dream of passing one of the toughest examinations in the country? Perhaps you've experienced moments when life's hardships surrounded you from every side, making you feel completely broken inside. But today's story is about a young woman who rewrote her destiny through nothing but determination, a girl whose clothes were old and worn, yet whose dreams were richer than anyone else's, a girl whose wisdom and honesty earned the respect of even the nation's highest officials. If you enjoy inspiring stories like this, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments what you would have done if you were in her place. It was a cold winter morning. A gentle breeze drifted through the quiet village while thin streams of smoke rose from small houses, showing that families had already begun their day. At the very edge of the village stood a tiny house made of mud and rusted tin sheets. That humble home belonged to Emma Carter and her mother, Sarah Carter. Emma was 23 years old. Her innocent smile, hopeful eyes, and hard-working hands reflected years of struggle. Her father, Michael Carter, had once worked as a janitor at the local government school, but he had passed away several years earlier after a long illness. Since then, Sarah had been working as a house cleaner, washing dishes in other people's homes just to keep food on the table. One afternoon, Emma sat quietly in her small room. On a cracked wooden table lay a single envelope. She couldn't stop looking at it. It was her official civil services interview call letter. In the corner of the kitchen, Sarah was roasting dry pieces of bread over a small stove. Softly she asked, "You're leaving for the city today, aren't you, sweetheart?" Emma smiled. "Yes, Mom. Today is the biggest day of my life." Sarah looked away. "I wish your father were here today." Emma gently lowered her eyes. "He would have been so proud of us." Sarah reached into her pocket and handed Emma a few folded bills. "This is all I could save." Emma looked at the money and then at her mother. "But how will you buy your medicine?" Sarah forced a smile. "Don't worry about me. Just do well in your interview. Everything else will work out." Emma knew she was lying. For several days, her mother's cough had become worse, but poverty often forces people to hide their pain behind a smile. Emma packed her documents into an old, faded backpack. She wore the same simple suit she had worn to her college farewell ceremony the previous year. The fabric had faded. Several patches had been stitched onto her scarf. The village women often mocked her. "You want to become a civil services officer? Look at your clothes first. Emma never argued. She simply smiled and kept walking toward her dream. She walked all the way to the bus station. People stared as she passed. Some laughed. One man called out, "Hey Emma, where are you going with all those files?" "I'm going for my civil services interview." The crowd burst into laughter. "Our Emma is going to become the district collector." Emma didn't respond. She kept walking. The bus was overcrowded. There wasn't a single empty seat. She stood for the entire 5-hour journey while passengers kept staring at her worn-out clothes. A stylish young woman whispered to her friend with a mocking smile, "She looks like she came straight from a tiny village. Maybe she's looking for a job." Emma silently turned toward the window. She had grown used to humiliation. 5 hours later, the bus finally reached the city. The towering buildings left her speechless. She had never seen a place so grand. As she crossed the road, one of her sandals suddenly snapped. Oh no. She sat on the roadside and tried fixing it with a small safety pin. People walked past her without even slowing down. No one offered to help. After struggling for several minutes, she finally managed to reach the interview center. The sight before her stopped her in her tracks. Massive gates, luxury cars, candidates dressed in expensive suits, elegant families, fluent English conversations, prestigious university names echoed everywhere. It felt like an entirely different world. Taking a deep breath, Emma walked inside. The moment people noticed her worn clothes, several candidates smiled at each other. One young man laughed quietly. "She's here for the interview too? I think she's in the wrong building." Emma ignored every word. She quietly walked to an empty corner and sat down. Behind her, another voice laughed. "Best of luck, Collector Madam." The laughter echoed around the waiting hall. Emma closed her eyes for a moment. She refused to let their words break her confidence. As her interview turn approached, her hands began to tremble. She reached into her pocket and took out an old photograph of her late father. Looking at it, she whispered softly, "Dad, please stay with me today." Just then, the interview room door opened. "Come in, Emma Carter." Emma took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and stepped inside. 5 members of the interview panel sat behind a large table covered with official files. The chairman removed his glasses and looked carefully at her. Like everyone else that day, the first thing he noticed was her simple, worn-out clothing. A senior female officer smiled politely before asking, "So, you're here for the civil services interview?" If you like this style, I can continue with part 2 in the same cinematic, natural English format with all Indian names replaced by Western names. "Yes, sir." "Yes, ma'am." Emma quietly took her seat. For a few moments, complete silence filled the interview room. The chairman finally looked at her file. "So, where did you complete your education?" "Sir, I studied at my village's government school and later graduated from the district college. I prepared for this examination without joining any coaching institute." "Interesting. And what did your father do?" "He worked as a school janitor, sir, but he is no longer with us." The chairman nodded before asking another question. "What is the importance of fundamental rights in the Constitution?" Emma answered with confidence. The panel continued. "If you were appointed to govern one of the poorest districts in the country, what would be your first priority?" "Education and healthcare, sir," Emma replied without hesitation. The biggest reason behind poverty is the lack of opportunities. If people receive proper education and access to quality healthcare, they can build a better future for themselves. Another officer leaned forward. "You come from an extremely poor family yourself. If you are selected for such an important position, do you think success will change you?" Emma smiled politely. "No, sir. Poverty never changes a person's mindset. It only reflects their circumstances." "What is your greatest strength?" "I never give up." "And your biggest weakness?" "My mother." The panel exchanged curious glances. "What do you mean?" "If my mother cries, I can't stay strong." The room fell silent once again. The chairman asked his final question, "And if you are not selected today?" Emma looked directly into his eyes. "I'll prepare again and return stronger, sir, because giving up has never been an option in my life." A gentle smile appeared on the chairman's face. Thank you, Emma. Emma thanked every member of the panel before quietly leaving the room. Outside, several candidates immediately began whispering. That was quick. Looks like she got rejected. But inside the interview room, the panel members remained silent. After a few moments, one senior officer finally spoke. There's something very special about that young woman. Another panelist nodded. Her clothes may be poor, but her thinking is incredibly rich. Meanwhile, Emma walked alone through the busy streets of the city. She had almost no money left. She was hungry, yet an unusual sense of peace rested on her face. For the first time in her life, she truly believed that hard work might actually be powerful enough to change destiny. As evening approached, the city came alive with dazzling lights. Cars rushed through crowded streets. Horns echoed everywhere. Thousands of people hurried past each other. Yet among that endless crowd, Emma was completely alone. Her old backpack rested on her shoulder while the interview questions continued replaying in her mind. She reached into her pocket and counted the remaining money. After setting aside enough for the bus fare, she had barely enough left to buy a small snack. She hadn't eaten anything since morning. She bought 2 inexpensive pastries from a roadside stall and sat quietly on a nearby bench. The moment she took her first bite, she remembered her mother. That morning, Sarah had skipped her own meal just to make sure Emma had enough money for the trip. Emma slowly lowered the food, her eyes filled with tears. Back in the village, Sarah sat outside their tiny house, constantly looking toward the road. The neighborhood women once again began making fun of her. So, has your collector daughter returned yet? Another woman laughed. This is what happens when poor people dream too big. Sarah didn't answer. She simply looked up at the sky, silently praying for her daughter's success. Meanwhile, Emma reached the bus station. Her heart sank. The last bus to her village had already left. She asked several people for help. No one stopped. No one cared. As the cold night grew darker, Emma quietly sat in one corner of the bus station, hugging her old backpack tightly against her chest. A few strangers stared at her suspiciously. After a while, an elderly woman walked over with a kind smile. My dear, where are you trying to go? To a small village near Millbrook, Emma replied softly. I'm afraid you've missed the last bus. The old woman smiled warmly. Stay here tonight. You'll catch the first bus tomorrow morning. Thank you so much, Emma said gratefully. At sunrise, the first bus finally arrived. Emma quickly climbed aboard. Several hours later, she reached her village. Sarah was already waiting outside. The moment she saw Emma, her tired eyes filled with joy. My daughter, you're home. Emma rushed forward and hugged her tightly. So, how did your interview go? Sarah asked anxiously. It went well, Mom. But everyone there came from big cities and prestigious universities. Sarah gently held her face. My daughter is no less than anyone. Just then, someone from the neighborhood shouted sarcastically, Look who's back, our future collector. Emma ignored every comment. The very next day, she resumed teaching neighborhood children to earn enough money for household expenses. The children adored her. One little girl asked innocently, Teacher Emma, will you really become the district collector someday? Emma smiled. If you keep working hard, nothing is impossible. But every night, fear slowly returned. She wondered, what if I don't get selected? What if all my sacrifices mean nothing? One night, she heard her mother coughing violently. This time, there was blood. Emma rushed over in panic. She brought water immediately. Sarah tried to hide it. It's nothing. I'm fine. But Emma already knew the illness had become serious. The following morning, she took her mother to the government hospital. The hospital was overcrowded, long waiting lines, overworked doctors, patients everywhere. After several hours, the doctor completed the examination. Treatment must begin immediately, Emma asked nervously. Doctor, how much will it cost? The doctor handed her a prescription. The consultation is inexpensive because this is a government hospital. However, some of the essential medicines must be purchased outside. Emma's face turned pale. On the way home, Sarah tried comforting her. Don't worry about me, sweetheart, I'll be fine. But Emma knew the truth. Without money, treatment would be almost impossible. That night, she opened a small wooden box. Inside lay her late father's old wristwatch. It was the last precious memory she still had of him. The next morning, she sold it As days passed, the entire village learned that Emma had appeared for the civil services interview. Some people laughed, some grew jealous, but many were genuinely proud of her. One afternoon, the village school teacher, Mr. Wilson, visited her home. "You've made this entire village proud, Emma." He quietly placed some money on the table. Emma immediately refused. "I can't accept this." Mr. Wilson smiled. "This isn't charity, it's my blessing." Meanwhile, back at the Civil Services Commission headquarters, the interview panel had gathered for an important evaluation meeting. The senior female officer suddenly asked, "What was the name of that young woman?" "Emma Carter," another officer replied. "Bring me her file again." As they reviewed her records, everyone fell silent. Government school education, no coaching, extreme poverty, yet an outstanding interview. One officer finally said, "Her communication skills still need improvement, but her honesty, maturity, and clarity of thought are exceptional." Another nodded, "Our country needs officers who truly understand the struggles of ordinary people." Meanwhile, Emma knew nothing about those discussions every single day. She simply prayed and waited. One early morning, the village postman shouted from outside, "Emma, a letter has arrived for you." Emma ran outside. Her hands trembled as she accepted the official envelope. The entire village gathered around her. Everyone stared silently as she slowly opened it. She unfolded the document. Her eyes rushed across the printed words. Suddenly, her hands began shaking uncontrollably. Sarah became frightened. "What happened, my child?" Tears rolled down Emma's face. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. Finally, in a trembling voice, she whispered, "Mom, I made it." The entire village fell silent. Those who had mocked her lowered their heads in shame. Sarah collapsed to her knees, crying with happiness. My daughter has become a civil services officer." Children began cheering throughout the village. But as Emma continued reading the letter, her smile slowly faded. At the bottom of the page was another instruction. She was required to report to the National Training Academy in the capital city the following month. Her heart grew heavy. She had no money for the journey, and her mother's health was getting worse with every passing day. Outside the house, the village celebrated her success. Some people were amazed, some were jealous. Others looked at her with respect for the very first time. Soon, local reporters arrived. One journalist switched on his camera and asked, "Emma, despite growing up in extreme poverty, how did you achieve such an incredible success?" Emma smiled softly. "My dreams were always bigger than my problems." "And how did you feel when people constantly laughed at you?" Emma looked around at the crowd before answering calmly, "When a poor person dares to dream, most people think it's just another joke." Emma's words left the crowd speechless. Many of the people standing there slowly lowered their heads in embarrassment. The very next morning, Emma's photograph appeared on the front page of the district newspaper. The headline read, "Young woman in worn-out clothes clears the civil services examination." Within hours, people across the entire district were talking about her remarkable journey. Yet despite all the attention, Emma's real struggle was far from over. Mr. Wilson and several kind-hearted villagers came together and somehow managed to collect enough money for her journey to the National Training Academy in the capital. Sarah smiled despite her worsening condition. "Go, my daughter. Don't worry about me. I'll recover with the medicines from the hospital." Emma nodded with tearful eyes. Deep inside, she knew her mother was hiding the truth. With a heavy heart, she left for the capital. It was an icy winter morning. The enormous training academy was filled with newly selected officers standing proudly in formation. Confidence radiated from every face. Expensive suits, polished shoes, luxury watches, fluent English conversations. Everything around Emma felt like a completely different world. She quietly stood at the very back. She owned only 2 sets of clothes. One was the same old suit she had worn for years. The other was a simple outfit her mother had managed to buy after borrowing money from a neighbor. Soon the official introductions began. One young man stepped forward confidently. "My name is Ethan Miller. I graduated from Westbridge University." Another officer smiled proudly. "I'm Olivia Bennett, and I completed my master's degree at the London School of Economics." One after another, everyone introduced themselves by mentioning prestigious universities and wealthy family backgrounds. Finally, it was Emma's turn. She slowly stood up. My name is Emma Carter. I'm from a small rural village. A few trainees exchanged amused smiles. Emma continued confidently. I completed my entire education in government schools. Suddenly, two young officers standing behind her whispered quietly, Isn't she the girl who went viral on social media? The one who attended the interview wearing torn clothes? Their laughter echoed softly across the hall. Emma heard every word. But this time, she refused to remain silent. She turned toward them and smiled calmly. Yes, I am that same girl. My clothes may have been torn, but my dreams never were. The entire hall fell silent. For the first time, the chief training officer smiled with genuine admiration. Well said, Emma. Days turned into weeks. The academy's training was tougher than anything Emma had ever experienced. Every morning began at 4 o'clock, long-distance running, physical drills, academic lectures, field assignments, presentations, leadership exercises. Every single day tested her limits. At first, speaking fluent English and adapting to the modern environment was incredibly difficult. Some trainees continued making fun of her. One day, every trainee had to deliver an important presentation. As Emma walked toward the stage, someone whispered loudly, Let's see how the village girl speaks English. A few people laughed quietly. Emma's hands began trembling. The presentation file almost slipped from her hands. Then, she remembered her mother's words. Never be afraid, my daughter. Emma closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. Then she began speaking. Her opening was hesitant. Her voice shook slightly, but as she started talking about the real problems faced by rural communities, everything changed. She spoke from experience, not from textbooks. She explained how millions of hardworking people only needed one genuine opportunity. She spoke about forgotten villages, broken schools, poor health care, children with limitless talent but no resources. Finally, she concluded, The poor do not need anyone's sympathy, they only need a fair chance. There is no shortage of talent in our villages. The only thing missing is opportunity. The room remained silent for a moment. Then, the entire hall erupted into thunderous applause. The very people who once laughed at her now stood up to applaud her. The chief training officer smiled proudly. Excellent, Emma. We're proud of you. For the first time since joining the academy, Emma truly believed that what she once considered her greatest weakness had become her greatest strength. That very night, as Emma sat quietly inside her dormitory room, her phone suddenly rang. The caller ID displayed one familiar name, Mr. Wilson. She answered immediately, but his voice was shaking. My child, come back home as soon as you possibly can. Emma's heart skipped a beat. What happened, Mr. Wilson? Is everything all right? A long, terrifying silence followed. Then he spoke softly. Your mother's condition has become very critical. She's in the hospital. The phone slipped from Emma's hands. Her entire world froze. The next morning she rushed home without wasting a single moment. Throughout the journey she prayed continuously. Please, God, don't take my mother away. When she reached the district hospital, Sarah had already been admitted to the intensive care unit. Her face had become extremely pale. Her breathing was weak. Emma rushed to her bedside and held her hand tightly. Sarah slowly opened her eyes. A gentle smile appeared on her tired face. My officer daughter, you've come. Emma burst into tears. You're going to be all right, Mom. I'm here now. Sarah gently squeezed her daughter's hand. My child, don't worry anymore. My time has come. No, please don't say that, Emma cried. I still have so much to do for you. Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks. Your father's dream has finally come true. I couldn't be happier. Suddenly, the medical monitors began sounding loudly. Doctors rushed into the room. Emma was immediately asked to step outside. She stood in the hospital corridor, crying and praying with all her heart. Several painful minutes passed. Finally, the doctor walked out. One look at his face told her everything. I'm so sorry, we couldn't save her. Emma collapsed onto the floor. At that moment, her entire world fell apart. The mother who had stayed hungry so her daughter could eat, who had endured every insult society threw at them, who had sacrificed everything to help her daughter succeed, was gone forever. The entire village attended Sarah's funeral. Even those who once mocked Emma stood with tears in their eyes, ashamed of the way they had treated her. Mr. Wilson placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Your mother was an extraordinary woman. She fulfilled every responsibility with dignity. Emma silently looked toward the sky. It felt as though life had given her its greatest blessing and taken away its greatest gift at exactly the same time. A few weeks later, Emma returned to the academy. She was no longer the frightened village girl everyone had first met. There was deep pain in her eyes, but that pain had transformed into incredible strength. She devoted herself completely to her training. Months later, the historic day finally arrived, graduation day. The passing out parade. Every young officer stood proudly in full ceremonial uniform. Emma kept searching the audience for one familiar face, her mother, but only an empty seat existed in her heart. The ceremony began. Names were announced one after another. Then the loudspeaker echoed across the parade ground. Emma Carter. The entire stadium erupted into applause. Emma marched forward with pride. The chief guest placed the prestigious medal around her neck. The training director smiled warmly. You are a true inspiration, Emma. Tears filled her eyes. She looked toward the sky and whispered, Mom, I did it. Your dream has finally come true. A few months later, Emma received her first posting as an assistant district commissioner in one of the country's most underdeveloped regions. When her official government vehicle entered her village for the first time, everything had changed. The same people who once laughed at her now stood respectfully along both sides of the road. Even the village chief bowed his head. Little girls ran behind the vehicle, shouting joyfully, Look, Officer Emma is here. Emma stepped out of the car. Ignoring the celebrations, she walked straight to the government school where her father had once worked as a janitor. Seeing the broken classrooms and neglected buildings, she immediately turned to the senior officials. I want this entire school transformed within 1 month. Every child here deserves modern education and equal opportunities. From that day onward, the district slowly began changing. New schools were built, government hospitals improved, scholarship programs were introduced so that no child would ever have to abandon their dreams because of poverty. One afternoon, while Emma was working in her office, an elderly street vendor came to meet her. He was the same kind old man who had once given her food near the bus station when she had almost no money left. With tears in his eyes, he said, My daughter, you've shown the world what determination can achieve. Emma immediately stood up, respectfully shook his hand, and thanked him with a warm smile. That night, she stood alone outside the same small mud and tin house where her journey had begun. The cool night breeze gently touched her face. For a brief moment, it felt as though her mother's voice floated through the wind. God will never let your hard work go to waste, my child. Tears rolled down Emma's cheeks. She looked up at the stars and whispered softly, Someone's clothes may be torn, but their dreams never have to be. If Emma's journey touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share your own story in the comments, and subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us that determination can overcome even the greatest obstacles.